And I want to wrap up the segment about why it happened. On the hierarchy of I hate to do the blame game, but where do you think blame lies? Can we spread it evenly across the whole kit and caboodle of all these agencies and political and Wall Street figures?
I think everybody gets to take a bit of that.
Right.
It isn't partisan problem. It's endemic. Because it had to do with the Congress, it had to do with Wall Street, it had to do with the people who were taking these mortgages that should have known better. I mean, if they hadn't have signed up for them, they wouldn't have happened either.
Right.
And I've agreed with you that I can basically understand better why people would take an inappropriate loan if it was offered to them. But still, I mean, it's endemic through there.
Right.
I don't think, but nobody gets to escape the blame. We're all in this, and we all made it happen.
Right. But again, one of the things that I've kind of latched onto is that, you know, we were told what an incredible amount of money this $700 billion bailout was. But the scope of the obligation for the Fannie and Freddie fiasco is $5.6 trillion. So it's many more times greater than the $700 billion, and yet people kind of forget that. Whereas it seems to me that that was the root cause of all this happening. I remember hearing somebody on MSNBC, of all places, saying it was the banks clogged with these terrible mortgages that caused the credit to become unavailable. But so I think when everybody looks at the $700 billion bailout as and it is an ungodly amount of money, it pales in comparison to the root problem, which is more than a $5 trillion problem.
Well, it's much more than that, because that's just what's in Fannie and Freddie. What's in the rest of all these, the system is much, much larger than that. But yes, we go back to saying the real problem was all these inappropriate loans, and then what happened was eventually the music stopped.
Yeah.
This was musical chairs, in which everything was going on fine, but what happened was eventually the music stopped, and people began seeing that this was not going to work. And when that happened, you couldn't sell off these bad loans. And what you had was banks like Washington Mutual, which has failed, Countrywide, IndyMac, these banks that have gone down in our area suddenly could not sell the paper, and they were left holding a whole lot of it. And they kept making the loans, because what else are they going to do? So even after they couldn't sell them, so basically they were inundated with all these things they couldn't lay off anymore. And even in their easiest times, the worst loans they couldn't put in. Sometimes they couldn't, but the worst loans they had made, they had to keep themselves, but they kept them.
Yeah.
So when the music stopped, they were all left holding a lot of stuff they had hoped to sell off.
And when I started this, it was like, how did they let this happen? The people who are the instigators of all this, where do they stand today? I'm not sure they are the worst off in this whole scenario.
Well, the people running Fannie and Freddie aren't the worst off. They got big payoffs when they left. People in the banks, we just read about that in the case of another one. It's disgraceful. No way around that. It's just disgraceful.
And speaking of disgraceful, I think the performance of Nancy Pelosi during this financial crisis definitely fits that description. Because, you know, she was supposed to get that bill passed, the $700 billion bill. She made an issue of the enormity of it. And yet, rather than show leadership, rather than bring the parties together and get that bill passed, she had to stoop to partisan politics. Even though she didn't get 95 of her own Democrats, she blamed this entire situation, not only not passing the bill was blamed on the Republicans, but the entire situation was blamed on the Republicans, which was totally inappropriate and totally inaccurate. I think what's even more disturbing is that at that point, the bill, of course, had to go to the Senate. It was larded up with another $100 billion worth of pork, and then sent back to Nancy Pelosi's house, where it passed like that. Thank you, Don, and I'm very much looking forward to our third segment, where we talk about where we go from here. But I think there's one thing that's very clear, and where we go from here is not a place we can reach with Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi has proven she cannot lead, and she's certainly not the person to have at the helm of Congress as we go into the most uncertain times this country has seen. So I would like you to look at my website, look at my issues, www.danawalshforcongress.com or www.defeatnancypelosi.com. Thank you.